Then they told them what had happened along the road and how he had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread. Please be seated. It is still the day of the resurrection in our gospel lesson today, and two of the disciples are trying to bust a move out of town just as quickly as they can. All seems lost to them. They feel dejected, their heads are hanging low as they leave. And over again they keep saying, but we had hoped. But we had hoped that he was the Messiah. But he suffered one of the cruelest and most unimaginable deaths there could be. But we had hoped that he was the Son of God. Yet in his death, he seemed totally forsaken by God. I think we can all imagine ourselves walking along that road. We've all had times in our life when we when our hopes have been lost, and we have also said those words, but we had hoped. But we had hoped. But we had hoped to travel during our golden years until the diagnosis came back positive. But we had hoped that marriage would be easy. But relationships are not always easy, are they? But we had hoped the new job would go smoothly, that all would be well. Then we found out what the work really was. I think we've all experienced the brokenness of the world. We've all experienced loss. We've all had joys, but also all experienced pain of this world. We've all been let down by the world at times. I think we've all traveled that road to Emmaus. We've all traveled that road. Yet as the two make their way out of town, they cross paths with a stranger. The stranger comes alongside them and walks beside them. He doesn't really say anything at first, doesn't tell them how they should feel or what they should do. The stranger just listens. The stranger just listens. And after a while, after a few miles down the road, the stranger begins to speak. And this stranger begins to show them how their story and their loss fits in with God's story. Shows them how their story connects with God's desire to redeem the world, to heal the brokenness of humanity, to restore our losses, and that the divine love would be united with humans, that God would be connected intimately with all of us. And he helps them to see their part in this healing of the world. Helps them to see their part, that their story, they would see their unique role in God's story. And so they make their way down the road, and after a while they come to this village. And it's interesting that Jesus doesn't offer to come in. They have the choice to let him go on. Yet something, it seems, has been awakened in them. They want more. They want to hear more, to see more, to experience more of this teaching. They're drawn to the stranger. So they invite the stranger into their house. They welcome him into their home, offer some hospitality, and then they sit down at the table. And then there's a switch. Did you notice that? Jesus, who is the guest, becomes the host. He takes the role of the host and he takes the bread, he blesses it, he breaks it, and he gives it to them, and is revealed in this holy meal and in this holy encounter along the road. These actions, take, bless, break, and give, Now, these aren't the only times they occur in the Gospels, are they? There's almost always a test when I stand up here. It's not the only. Can anyone think of another time they occur in the Gospels? I heard some mumbling. There's this time when Jesus is teaching by the Sea of Galilee, and the people there have been with him all day, and they're hungry. They're hungry. They're hungry for the good news of God's love for them, but their stomachs are grumbling too. And there's a little boy with 5 loaves and a couple of fish, right? And Jesus takes those 5 loaves, he offers them to God, takes them, blesses them, breaks them, and gives them to that crowd assembled, and there's enough food for all to eat. Then at the Last Supper, there's bread and there's wine. And Jesus takes the bread, blesses the bread, breaks it, gives it to his friends and followers at that meal as a sign that he will always be with them anytime they gather around the table to share bread and share wine. Jesus promises. It's interesting that this seems to be the arc of many things in our lives and in the gospel lessons. Sometimes we call this mystery of the dying and rising of all things the Paschal mystery, how bread and wine can both be bread and wine and Christ's body and blood at the same time, how oftentimes in our loss we experience great blessing, or God finds some way to work through our loss, and we experience God's presence or God's blessing. Even Jesus, even examining his life, we see that he was taken or chosen to come and reveal God's love for us, to walk among us. Jesus was taken. He was blessed. At his baptism, the voice from the cloud said, "You are my beloved, and you I am well pleased." He was broken by the sorrows of this world and definitely by the suffering of the cross. And yet he continues to be given to each one of us every day. His presence remains with us through the resurrection, which we celebrate on this 3rd Sunday of Easter. This is the cycle of loss and renewal, both in the Gospels and in our own lives. I was visiting a couple this past week, and the husband is very frail, and they watch online regularly. I'm sure they're watching right now because they sent me a message that the bulletin hadn't been updated. Would someone please put the right bulletin on the website? And they said, "I'm so glad that you didn't change the words that are said at the invitation to the table. I'm so glad you kept those, because they're not in the prayer book." They realize that. "Behold who you are, become what you receive," is our invitation to the table. And they explained to me the origin, that those come from the Iona community. And when they have communion at Iona, that is the words. "Behold who you are, become what you receive." Those are really nice words, aren't they? They're really comforting, really fluffy, comforting words, aren't they? But have you ever thought about what that might mean? Behold who you are, become what you receive. It means that we too are taken, blessed, broken, and given to a world that is suffering and is broken. Taken can also mean chosen. We are each chosen to bear the unique image of God that we have out into the world. Each one of us has a unique message, a unique part to play in revealing God's love to a world that desperately needs it. To be taken by Christ is to be chosen. And this message that we are taken, blessed, broken, and given, it's a message that Henry Nouwen used to preach, so some of this comes from him. To be chosen does not mean that others are not chosen. To be chosen, it's not like to be chosen in this world. I tend to sneak through here as I leave at the end of the day to get to my car, and I was coming through here a few weeks ago, and there was an audition for the St. Martin's Choir going on in here, and I paused a minute to listen. And it just happened we were having our staff meeting the next day, and I said to Tim, I said, you were doing an audition. That was an audition yesterday, wasn't it? And Tim said, yeah, it was an audition. I said, she had a lovely voice, didn't she? But she was extremely nervous, very nervous, and she was missing some of the words and some of the notes. I said, she wasn't chosen for the choir, was she? And he said, no. I told her, come back next year. So with Christ, you are chosen. You are chosen. You are God's first choice to play your unique role in sharing God's love with a world that so desperately needs it. You are taken. You are chosen. You are called. You're also blessed, definitely blessed. We are sacrament in which we acknowledge the blessing we all have as God is our sacrament of baptism, in which this voice from the cloud speaks to each one of our hearts and says, you are my beloved. With you I am well pleased, and you my favor rests. We are also called in that. We make promises to seek and serve Christ in all people and to respect the dignity of every human being. It's a calling. It's a mini ordination, if you will, at our baptism. And in our chosenness and in our calling, part of the role is to help one another see their chosenness. We're chosen to help recognize the belovedness and the blessing that each person around us bears. Called to see the goodness, the image of God. Called to see the Christ, to seek and serve the Christ in all people. We are blessed. We are called beloved. And we are also broken. The world doesn't always go along doesn't always appreciate our calling, doesn't always appreciate our chosenness. Sometimes the world doesn't handle us as gently as we would like. We know that. Sometimes our relationships, perhaps our relationships in our own family of origin, doesn't reflect that perfect divine parental relationship with God that we all desire. Following God's calling is not easy business. It's not for the faint of heart by any means. We are broken. Sometimes those we thought were our friends betray us or say hurtful things. Sometimes our relationships reflect the brokenness of the world. But we have a couple of choices when it comes to brokenness. We can pretend that everything's okay, that we're not broken, that all is well when it's not. But to do that is perhaps to put that on someone else. As they say, hurt people is the saying. Or we can put our brokenness and our pain and our hurts and sorrow under the blessing. we can remember that we are beloved children of God. So we can place our brokenness under the blessing. We can meditate or reflect on the image of Christ's suffering on the cross and how he takes all of our pain and sorrow and hurts in on the cross. And when we admit our brokenness, a weight is lifted. It's okay not to be perfect. It's okay to try to be God's love in a world that always pushes against it. And ultimately, we are given. We are given. We are blessed that we may be a blessing to others and that we may bear fruit. To be given, I think, and to be taken, blessed, broken, and given requires just a little bit of what's called surrender. To place ourselves in God's hands, not knowing where things are headed, not knowing where they're leading, but to allow ourselves to be like those loaves and those fishes, that we may be bread, that we may be wine for thousands, for our immediate family, for our circle of friends, that love may spread to those around us, that it may bear fruit for generations and generations, that we may be given for the love and life of the world. Amen.